This is Inside Town Hall, a behind-the-scenes look at city government and the issues affecting you and your family.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of Inside Town Hall. I'm your host, Madeline Shields. We are talking about the city's legislative priorities this episode. Every few months, we invite in several city councilors to join us for the discussion. And joining me this month are Rex Rolfing and Greg Neitzert, Pat Starr, and Marshall Selberg. Thanks for joining us for Inside Town Hall. Let's get started. We have a lot to talk about. What's going on in the legislature?
Looked at me first, so I'll take it. There's a lot. In fact, I was up there on Wednesday talking in front of one of the committees, the Senate Military Affairs Committee, regarding the new veteran cemetery that we want to put up in Sioux Falls. City of Sioux Falls, in fact, we're bringing a resolution on Monday, our next meeting, to make some land available to the state of South Dakota to put the cemetery on, and then they are hopefully going to appropriate some money so that we can do the preliminary design work and things like that, that then the VA, the Veterans Administration, will come in and approve so that we can, in a couple of years, have a cemetery here. There's 70-some thousand veterans in the eastern part of South Dakota. 42,000 of them are within 75 miles of Sioux Falls. This is a tremendous event, or tremendous opportunity for us to provide a cemetery for the people who have done so much for us, and allow them to be buried with their comrades.
Well, right now they're in the Black Hills. Is that true?
There's one in that's a federal cemetery in the Black Hills in Sturgis. Then there's another one up at Fort Snelling in Minneapolis or St. Paul. And so to be buried in either one of those national cemeteries or veteran cemeteries, they got to travel out there, and that expense is on their own. So you think about someone in Brookings dying and being transported 400 miles out to Sturgis and then 400 miles back. It becomes quite an expense for the family to have that done. And this way they would be 50 miles, 60 miles away from it, and would have a really good spot. It's a beautiful location that we've selected, and hopefully it'll work.
Tell us again where the location is.
Location is northeast of Sioux Falls in the Slip-Up Creek area.
Okay.
Yeah, kudos to Councilor Rolfing and Councilor Kiley. I believe you two have been working on this for quite some time. Yeah. I think it's going to be kind of fun to watch that all come together. Nice job.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure and a privilege to be able to do it.
Do families, do they have to request or petition to be buried there? How does that work?
All they got to do is ask. There's a burial fee that the federal government gives to the cemetery of $749, and that's all the cost is. It doesn't cost them anything else. It's all set up, all ready to go, and assuming this all goes through. I'll give you an idea of the interest in this. It's really quite amazing. I polled all of you and all my fellow councilors, and they're all in favor of it at this point, and I don't see anything that would change that. The people who signed on, either as sponsors or co-sponsors of the bill in Pierre, all of them except one, and that legislature was not present. So the support is overwhelming, just overwhelming for it.
Well, I think if you want to, it's burden enough when your family member dies, and then you don't want to add to the burden of having to travel for the funeral. And then, for Memorial Day, or you just want to put flowers on the grave, that's a hardship.
Exactly. Some people can't travel that far. Widowers can't travel that far all the way out there, but they could travel to Sioux Falls, the small, time it would take to do that from nearby cities. So,
what do you think is the reaction from veterans? Did you hear from folks?
We had a room full of veterans in Pierre on Wednesday, all of them obviously supporting it, and feel very strongly that now is the time for us to do this. The neat thing about this is that the $600,000 that the state of South Dakota will have to allocate for the preliminary planning and that kind of thing, as soon as the okay is given by the Veterans Administration to build it, they will pay for the entire amount that's being billed, and they'll give back the $600,000 to the state of South Dakota. So literally there's no upfront cost for them, for the state. They will have to incur the operating expenses, which should not be much, we figured out, because of the number of veterans who should be buried there and the $749 per burial.
So there'll be a staff there that would maintain the facility
Right.
and that would be the state that would pay for
Right.
that.
Right.
Okay.
But then it'd be offset by the fees coming in from the Veterans Administration for those burials.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a great project.
We needed to act kind of quickly on this too, right? Because they were talking about maybe putting one in not far from us, and you can only have one in such a vicinity. Or
We're one of 5 states that does not have a state cemetery, state veteran cemetery. Minnesota has 2. They're looking at another one which would encroach on the territory that we have. You know, and I don't territory, but the area surrounding where we have the 42,000 veterans. And so it's imperative that we get this done now.
Yeah. Well, if you're a lifelong resident of South Dakota, you probably don't want to be buried in Minnesota.
Exactly.
I would think.
Exactly. Yep.
Okay. So we will listen for more of that as the legislative session goes on.
The bill was forwarded to the Joint Appropriations Committee to find us $600,000, at which point then it'll come directly out of that committee, hopefully, to both the House and the Senate, and they will vote on it, and then it'll be done.
Okay.
And we'll be voting then on Monday on a resolution to give the land to them.
Okay. Other things going on in the legislative session. We have a 911 surcharge. Let's talk a little bit about that.
Sure. The 911 surcharge is really an important issue. The 911 surcharge is something that you pay whenever you have a cell phone or a telephone. You'll see a line on your bill. That provides important funding for the 911 service centers, such as Metro 911 in our case. It provides quite a bit of their funding. And that funding is scheduled to sunset this year. It would go down from $1.25 to 75 cents. And if they lose that, in our case, for Metro Communications, I believe that would be $200,000 in lost revenue that would have to be made up. And so we are in full support of removing that sunset and giving them that stable funding that they need so that they can continue to operate and serve our citizens.
If they were to lose that $200,000, they would have to cut staff, what could be the possibilities or ramifications from that?
Sure, either staff would have to be cut, or there'd have to be budget cuts, or somebody would have to make up the funding. Sioux Falls provides, I believe, about 75% of the funding, and the county pays for the rest of it, and it's prorated based on the call volume, and we are about 75% of the call volume, so therefore we pay 75%. So we would presumably have to find it in our budget, or the county would, or we would have to make cuts.
I think Councilor Nitzer does a nice job of bringing up, that we're talking about the county and the city. This was the first year that we really sat down as a city and a county to come up with joint legislative priorities and putting a list together for all the citizens of both Sioux Falls and Minnehaha and Lincoln County as part of coming up with the things for the session that are important to all the entities to work together and bring our elected officials together to do those kind of things, both on the 911. And we have a list of, there was 9 or 10 items that we put together as part of the legislative priorities. So watching city government and county and state work together is a great thing. I think one of the things that you see in the state legislature often is that sometimes there's a lot of bills introduced. There are very few that end up passing and getting signed by the governor by the time they're done. But it gives elected officials a way to make a point or bring up an issue. And sometimes bills take 2 or 3 years or 2 or 3 sessions to get back through before a good compromise and a good working solution can do that. You see that in a number of bills, whether it's some changes to TIF. We saw some annexation bills that are coming up, and we can get deeper into some of those things that are on our list. But legislators are seeing some things that are happening here in Sioux Falls and happening in other parts of the state, and may want to put some guidelines or further guidelines in place for us, or hey, maybe things are working just fine once they sit down and debate the merits of the bill and the changes that they're making. So.
I heard today was the last day that you could introduce legislation, and they introduced 316 bills so far, 100 more than last year. So they've been busy out there.
Well, that means they're going to be busy in the next 4 to 6 weeks.
Right.
One thing I might mention about the legislative deal that we put together, the joint thing, we would really encourage Lincoln County to join us in that next year. so that we can even become more of a unified body going up there. I think there's a lot of things in Lincoln County that are the same, have the same problems, some of the same dilemmas, if you will, that we have, and to have a unified front would mean a lot.
So right now, you look at, you go to the legislative session as Sioux Falls and Minnehaha County, and you would like to see Lincoln County join that effort as well, which I guess would make sense when the largest city in Lincoln County is Sioux Falls.
Yes, we'd like that. We will make a concerted effort, I'm sure some of you will, to include them next year in this process, so that the legislators know that this doesn't just come from Sioux Falls, it comes from the county, the metro area, if you will. And that carries more clout. That's as simple as that.
Well, even if we live in a bigger city, do we have some of the same concerns and issues that resonate across the state of South Dakota, whether it's a small municipality or a bigger area? Do you think we see some of the same issues that you're all kind of trying to tackle in the legislative session?
Well, I think we have issues as South Dakotans. Oftentimes we get wrapped up in competing with Sioux Falls or Rapid City or different cities across the state, and really we're competing with the rest of the world, whether it's for economic development, whether it's educating our kids and providing world-class schools. It's not whether there's better schools in Harrisburg or Sioux Falls or Tri-Valley. It's whether or not we can compete on the world stage. When we send our kids to college and to the employment fields across the world, we want to make sure that there are things that are important to all of us as South Dakotans.
One of the things, we do have a lot of the same concerns. It's just a matter of scale. When I've gone to conferences and spent time with people from other smaller towns, they have a lot of the same concerns. It's just on a smaller scale. Mm-hmm. So we share a lot of the same concerns, a lot of the same issues, so we can all work together to solve problems.
Okay. What are some of the other things that Sioux Falls is keeping a close eye on in the legislative session?
Well, we had the annexation bill that was brought up, but I think that's already been defeated the other day.
Went to the 41st day.
Right, right.
Yeah, yep, it was. It would have made it very, very difficult to do an involuntary annexation. It would have allowed a petition of only 250 signatures, or 5% of the population. So just about any annexation could be brought to a vote. It's very, very difficult to involuntary annex an area. So I think the intentions were good, but I think some of the things in there would have been very problematic. I think the language was maybe a little troublesome.
I know that Councilor Kiley and Mike Cooper, Planning and Zoning, went up there to testify against this bill. Many people thought that when we did our study, our annexation study, it was a situation where we were saying, oh, well, here's, we want to take this section and this section that are not part of the city and this one, and we're just going to figure out a way we can annex them. That was not the purpose of that annexation committee. It was a way to set some guidelines so that in the future we don't have these pockets sitting in the middle of Sioux Falls, because that's what's going to happen, and that is what's happened. We don't have these pockets that are still outside the city of Sioux Falls. If they get a fire, they get a police call, they get anything like that, we're going to go. Sure. And so we're dealing with them, and we've made, I don't know, I say concessions, but we've done some different things to make it a lot easier if they would ever want to come in, and we would want them to come in.
Do you think the developers back, I don't know, maybe it was 30, 40, 50 years ago, they weren't really looking toward the future when they had these outside developments? They were thinking they're 5 miles, 10 miles outside of the city of Sioux Falls, and now all of a sudden here we are, and they're either right on the edge or they're in the city, but they still cannot be counted as Sioux Falls residents. Is that?
It's important to point out that we have not had joint jurisdictional zoning for very long. I think it's been about 15 years, and that's when a lot of these areas developed. Now we work together with the county to talk about what is appropriate in certain areas. So a lot of these rural subdivisions pre-existed that, and so they existed before. We've now grown around them, and now we found ourselves in this problem. Going forward, working together and having joint jurisdictional zoning, which means that both the county and the city have a say in how the zoning will work outside of the city limits within a couple of miles. We can work together to make sure we don't end up in these situations in the future.
I think Councilor Rolfing did a nice job, though, pointing out about the services that are provided. And that's, for me, one of the things that happened during the whole discussion of annexation and the meetings is explaining to people that, well, why would we join the city? And I explained, well, they're already getting the benefits. We're going to protect them. We're going to make sure that, you know, the roads that are going by them, because it's either surrounded by the city or part of the city. So part of it's a fairness issue of being able to pay. As a community, we come together to pay for fire, to pay for ambulance services, and all the water and sewer. And we have one subdevelopment that's really struggling with how to pay for sewer. They've got pipes that are breaking, and it's, you know, they just can't come together in a annexation agreement that works for everyone that lives in that area. And unfortunately, it's going to be when there's a problem, when there's a big problem that's going to be a very expensive one too. So it becomes a fairness issue for all of the residents. People who live inside the city paid those platting fees or paid the fees to pay for streets and the fire protection, and now we're asking, you know, as the city grows, or all cities across the state grow, how you bring those areas in. Where we've kind of gotten into trouble, I think Councilor Neitzer did a nice job of that as well, saying that we're annexing in places as they develop, as each developer does, but then we leave behind some places that are happy to be in that rural thing. The other is when we we don't have the ability to fairly charge people for streets and sidewalks and that infrastructure that's going on around them that they're already benefiting. So it's a complicated issue, but at the same time, it still comes down to fairness of people who live inside and outside of the city.
Is this more, it's a local issue for the city of
It's
Sioux Falls, but
no,
is
it's
it statewide that
Oh,
this
yes.
goes on everywhere?
And it happens in smaller towns too. You get somebody who moves in, you know, just outside the city limits in Clark, South Dakota. I'm just using that because that's where my wife is from. And then, but they want to, they've got a septic system. They don't want any of the other services. And then 5 years, there's there's all around them. There's buildings and stuff all around them. All of a sudden, what do? They're getting all the benefits and not paying for them, or they are they just haven't been in that situation. So it's all over the state. It's all over the state. We're you know, it's just one of those things that we've got to do. It's not fun. It's not fun. One of the reasons that people move out into the country is to pay lower taxes, because the taxes are usually lower out in that situation, and especially if they don't have to do, like Councilor Starr said, don't have to pay platting fees and all that are meant to pay for the infrastructure. So their houses are cheaper too. But eventually we got to catch up with it. It's got to catch up, and we're working with them any way we can to be fair and equitable to both sides.
But we did that. It was one of the things that we looked at is, if we annex an area, do they need sidewalks? Do they need curb and gutter? What can we do to make it less expensive but to provide the services? What I've found in the short time we've been on the council is it's a lot like parenting, unfortunately. You trust what the person that lives there now is going to do, but it's the person you sell it to. So you build a house even in the joint jurisdictional area around Sioux Falls, and you say, I don't want those services. I'm happy with the township ambulance service. I'm happy with the volunteer fire department. Septic system that you do, and I'm happy with those things. The problem is 5 years from now, you have a job change and you want to sell that house and you move, and someone buys that house and says, how come I don't have a professional paramedic coming to my, when I need an ambulance call, or my house is on fire, why isn't, I want those services. So it's not necessarily the person who applies to us that we don't trust, or not, it's not necessarily trust, but it's how do we do that in perpetuity as we move forward, as the next homeowner comes. Yeah, you won't do this, but the next one will. We've seen that with outbuildings where we've had, we trust the person who comes to us that, you won't turn this into an auto repair shop, but you sell, and the next person says, well, I got the shop here, there's my business opportunity, why can't I use it in this form? So zoning and planning and those things are probably one of the most interesting things that we do.
Right. Well, at this time, we're going to take a break, and we'll be back in just a moment. We have lots of other topics to talk about. We'll be right back.
My hero is my neighbor because she rakes the lawn for me when I can't.
She's always there whenever anyone needs a helping hand.
My teacher is my hero because she always makes time for everyone.
Well, welcome back to Inside Town Hall, where we are having a roundtable discussion with Rex Rolfing, Greg Neitzert, Pat Starr, and Marshall Selberg. Let's move on. We're going to talk about the Superhero Citizen Recognition Award. And superhero is S-I-O-U-X,
Right.
superhero. So what is that about?
Well, we kind of came up with the idea to kind of, in a town of 175,000 some people, I think that there's no shortage of both amazing people and inspirational stories, and I thought it would be kind of a nice idea to focus more on that, or take a little bit of our time in a council meeting to focus on some of that. Whether you're watching local, whether it be local or national news, there's no shortage of headlines, and usually it has to do with some kind of there's a fight or a scandal or some drama, and that's kind of what sells. But we've had no shortage of that, frankly, in our city council meetings recently. We've got quite a bit of drama, and frankly, you should have plenty of things to deliberate and debate. That's part of government. But we wanted to take a little time and focus on, again, some people and stories that are a positive. So that was kind of the inspiration behind it. We've been working on it for quite a while. I know last time you and I were together doing this show, we'd spent the time focusing on some folks that were going above and beyond in their volunteer efforts, and we're kind of building on that.
Okay. So what would happen under this program? And is it approved, or it could be approved?
It is approved.
Okay.
We just rolled it out this week. So basically, we're relying on the citizens to nominate folks that they see they're going above and beyond, and it could be on anything from volunteering for a certain group. They might be mentoring, they might be rock stars in your neighborhood or your church. I mean, we're pretty wide open on it. So folks can pick up an application at Carnegie Hall and fill it out to nominate somebody. They can go to siouxfalls.org/myhero, and then there's a thing you can click on there to submit any nominations. So we're making it really easy, but we're really kind of putting the call out. We're leaving it to citizens to help us with this and recognize people, and we will recognize those who get the award on the first council meeting of each month. So I'm looking forward to it. I think everybody's been helping with this, put it together, and it should be fun.
Who decides who the winner is for that month?
We have a selection committee that's been put together, and it is made up of 4 counselors, 1 council staff, and then 2 citizen members. So we'll have 7 people on that. So on the second Friday of each month, we will gather up the nominations up to that point. The selection committee will come up with their recommendations to the council to approve, and then they will be recognized from there. So keeping it kind of simple. But again, we're hoping people start keeping an eye out and get the nominations in. We started it this week, and I've already heard that I think we've got 7 or 8 nominations already, so off to a good start.
You might be overrun with good works. There's so many good volunteers and good people in Sioux Falls that do for others. So say you win for maybe the month of May, then what happens to all those other nominees for that month? Do they get tossed out, or do they go back into the pot? Yeah,
they'll be recognized. We're going to probably have to see as we started out how many we can recognize at one time. We'll be doing more than 1 on the first month. I'm kind of had it in mind, maybe 4 or 5 or 6. But we'll see. We'll work on that. But no, if somebody wins, they will be recognized. So we'll have some tweaks to work out as we go along. But they will, if they win, people will hear about it. And they'll get a recognition form. They'll be recognized by the mayor out front before the meeting. We'll have a plaque in Carnegie Hall that will display their name. We're working through some media outlets that they will promote these people through CityLink. They've been working on some ideas. So again, it should be fun.
Okay, great.
I congratulate Councilor Selberg on putting this program together. It's a positive way that we, as a council and as a city, can say thank you to so many people that do so many wonderful things around this community to make it the place, a good place to live and work that we all know and love.
Sure.
Thank you.
And you're not just looking for volunteers or people that, you could be somebody who helped your neighbor out, or if they mow your lawn or scoop your sidewalk. Is that what you're kind of looking for?
Right, somebody who's just kind of gone above and beyond whatever area it might be. Could be, I had the story that I'd had that really inspired it was a guy I knew in church who was there every Sunday for every service. He ushered at everything, never missed, and Yeah, he had passed away prematurely last spring, and that kind of really sprung things forward with me, that it's people like that who don't do things for the recognition, but people should hear about them and what they've done.
Great. And let's turn just a little bit and talk to Rex. You only have a couple of months left on the city council.
95 days.
95 days, got it down pat. Just like how many days till Christmas?
That's right.
But our other city councilors, this is your first go round with the city council. Let's talk a little bit about what your accomplishments have been.
You see, we don't like patting ourselves. We'll save it for the superhero
I've been chatting
awards
too
by
far
the
too
time.
much,
Yes,
yeah.
exactly. I think the one thing, though, that has been interesting in the first 2 years, or getting close to that first 2 years of serving on the council, is making sure that we remember to personalize the decisions we make. Sometimes we roll through things rather quickly because that's just the order of getting things done. But I think what we do affects people's lives, whether it's as simple as an alcohol permit for a wedding or special one-day permits that we do, but to zoning issues that become really personalized, that really are important to a neighborhood. I mean, we've had a number of those in the last couple of years, and just remembering that, it may be something we do a lot of, but it really impacts people's lives of what's happening. I think about rezoning over on 6th and Bonson that really brought a neighborhood together. Not all positive through the whole thing. I mean, it was rough at different times, but we've gotten to know their neighborhood. The Oakview Neighborhood Association has kind of spawned their beginning coming together through that one rezoning request that was made to us. So I think it's remembering the individuals that to slow down a bit and to see the tear. I mean, to have people come before us in tears. The one gentleman came before us that it's his first house. And it was at the end of a meeting, and we were rolling along, and I mean, he was so excited about him and his wife having their first home in Sioux Falls. And for the rest of us, it was another zoning thing that wasn't controversial, and we were rolling along, and he thought there was going to be a lot more to it, and just the emotion and the excitement of having that first home here in Sioux Falls.
I think a big thing for me has been the one-on-ones. It isn't so much things at the council meetings. It's just sitting down at somebody's table and helping them with something. I found a big part of the job is just being a liaison. It's simply somebody has a question or a problem. They don't know who to turn to. They don't know who to call in city government. So they might call me because I'm the representative. I know who to call. If it's a traffic issue, I know who to call. What city employee do I call? And to help them find the solution or get them to the person that can help them with what they need. And that has been a huge part of the job and one of the most enjoyable. I've been really proud of the work that we did on the annexation task force. I think that was really important. Finding compromises on some of these really tough rezonings, as Councilor Starr had talked about, where we were able to bring people together and try to find some sort of a common ground where everybody could, kind of be able to live with it. Maybe everybody didn't get what they wanted, but we could all live with it. So it's really those one-on-one relationships, and meeting these great people in the city has been really probably the best part.
All right.
I kind of think it's just such a huge learning curve. I mean, it's like they say, it's like trying to drink from a fire hose. Sometimes there's so much and it's coming at you. And I mean, we've been at this, on a little over a year and a half, and I kind of feel like I'm just kind of getting my groove on, or whatever. I'm trying to learn in the job and what all's involved. And I had one of the counselors put it well when we first started, and she said, everybody kind of finds their sweet spots, because there's so many different things, and you do have to know a lot, but you kind of have to pick and choose what you can really focus on, put your time on too. So, but it's to those out there who are running or may run, I'd just say, just be ready, and you got a lot to learn.
Okay.
And I got to say real quickly, because I know we're almost out of time, thank you, Sioux Falls, for allowing me to do this for the past 8 years. It's been a joy most of the time, and it's been a pleasure. It's been a real honor and a pleasure for me to serve.
All right. Well, thank you very much for your service. And we are out of time for Inside Town Hall. If you would like to get a hold of any of our city councilors, you can go to siouxfalls.org. And if you would like to nominate anyone for the Superhero Award, go to siouxfalls.org/myhero. Thanks for watching.